So are you sick of graphics card reviews yet? After all, we just went through a week where basically every major tech outlet vomited out stories about the new Radeon 7 left and right, as they should do for a new flagship product. But today we're going to be looking at a very different one, something that costs half as much and gives you much more value for your money. The NVIDIA RTX 2060s. I have 4 different models that we can compare and contrast, and hopefully this can allow you to get a better handle on what your next GPU might be. First, let me start off by saying that 2060 content started being pushed out around CES time, so I'm about a month late to the party, but I hope the wide scope of my testing will make up for it somewhat. The reason that we're a little delayed here is that NVIDIA told me that they'd be sending over a 2060 FE for review, and I thought that it would be important to include that card in our comparison to have something of a baseline. However, after telling me a card was coming and confirming my shipping info, they basically ghosted me. No card ever showed up, and to this day, I haven't been able to get them to answer a follow-up email or even a text message about it. So I'm not entirely clear on what happened, but as I kept waiting for a product to show up that never did, this review became more and more delayed. So guys, I'm sorry, and I hope it ends up being worth it. I would like to say thank you to the 4 vendors who actually did what they said they were going to do and get me over their version of an RTX 2060 as quickly as possible. And as you guys can see, that's Zotac, MSI, Gigabyte, and Asus. Let's start by taking a quick look at the cards themselves, and we'll start from our small and work our way up to our extra large. This is the Zotac RTX 2060 Twin Fan, and in addition to being the smallest GPU here, it's also the least expensive, coming in right at the $350 target that NVIDIA set. In fact, it's also clocked at reference spec with a target boost clock of 1680 MHz. The shroud is, if not identical to, at least very similar to the RTX 2070 Mini that I looked at in December, and is definitely one of the selling points of this product. It measures only 209mm or 8.3 inches in length, meaning that it should fit in almost any build and any chassis. It's also a strict 2-slot card, so even mini ITX builds with no room below the motherboard shouldn't have any issue. The gray backplate wraps around nicely to the rear and front of the card, and as the name implies, we have twin 90mm fans providing the cooling. As with everyone here except for Asus, the Zotac Twin Fan needs only a single 8-pin PCIe power connector, so depending on the rest of your system configuration, a 500-watt power supply likely will be sufficient. Our medium-sized 2060 is the MSI Ventus OC. I checked out this card at CES. In fact, I think I checked out all these cards at CES, but in any event, MSI told me that both of their 2060 models will feature custom PCB designs. So even though the Ventus doesn't look much bigger, by constructing their own PCB, MSI can better control power delivery and clock their version higher than reference. And that's exactly what we see here, with a rated boost clock of 1710 MHz. You still get a backplate, even though this is the less expensive of the MSI cards, but even though it looks pretty cool, it is just plastic, so I have a mild concern that this might actually trap heat against the rear of the PCB rather than help to dissipate it. Still though, the overall design is appealing, with a black and gray color scheme and MSI's Torx 2.0 fan configuration. The Ventus is 226mm long, again, fairly compact, and again only taking up 2 slots. As with all RTX 2060 models, the MSI Ventus comes loaded with 6GB of GDDR6 memory on board. You should be able to find it for $360, but retailers right now have it around $380. Our quote-unquote large 2060 is Gigabyte's gaming OC model, featuring 3 80mm fans that spin in alternating directions, a larger heatsink design, and functional metal backplate. The custom Gigabyte PCB should in theory be better at cooling the 2060 die and memory modules than the smaller cards in our testing, but we'll check on that in just a sec. Rated boost clock on this bad boy is 1830 MHz, a significant jump up from our small and medium cards, and again, one that will require that extra cooling capacity. While we're still at 2 slots here, the length of the gaming OC is stretched quite a bit, out to 280 millimeters. This is the point where if you have a smaller case with less available front to back spacing, you might need to consider looking elsewhere. At the very least, take some measurements before committing. At $380 on Newegg, it's about the same price as the Ventus is right now, and it's the first card in our group that comes with RGB LEDs, even if it's only an amuse-bouche on the Gigabyte logo. And finally, we've arrived at the XL, the Big Daddy, the Andre the Giant of our testing group, the Asus ROG Strix. At $400, it's not a whole lot more expensive than the others, but does pack in a bunch of extra features. First and foremost, and what most of you are worried about, I'm sure, is that yes, there are RGB LED effects on the backplate, on the side, and on the fan shroud, controllable through Asus's Aura Sync. Having gotten that out of the way, OC mode on this card boosts it all the way to 1860 megahertz, the highest here, but there's also a second BIOS that lets you run it slower if you'd rather save on power. It also comes with an enormous cooler at 300 millimeters in length and taking up 2.5 slots. Powering up that overclock is an additional 6-pin PCIe power connector, and helping cool it, Asus is using something they call Max Connect technology with precise machining that allows them to manufacture a 10 times flatter surface for the cold plate that contacts the GPU die. As I don't currently have an electron microscope, we'll just have to take their word on that one. At the end of the card, there are 2 PWM fan headers and a 12-volt RGB connector, allowing you to sync up your case fans and lighting. Enough talk though, let's see how these guys actually perform. And what would RTX testing be without at least checking out the performance in Metro Exodus? Here's some 4K gameplay with DXR on high and DLSS enabled. As you can probably tell, the 2060 isn't quite ready for this kind of massive workload, but at least the technology is there and is working. Finally. I'm sure we'll see better results when DLSS works with resolutions other than 4K. I'd honestly really like to try out one of these cards running at 3440 by 1440 with DLSS enabled and RTX on high or ultra. I bet that would be a very interesting experience. At 1080p with RTX on high, we get much more playable frame rates, although certainly there were still some dips underneath that 60 FPS magical number. So just circling back to our testing results, for the most part, if you're looking at any of the 2060s here, you know approximately what kind of performance you can expect. The biggest spread between average frame rates in some titles was about 5 frames per second, so not a world-breaking difference. However, all of the results that you saw were at stock settings. Here are the maximum stable overclock frequencies that I was able to achieve with each card. This is where the clocks stabilized at after about 30 minutes of stress. While each got above 2000, which in and of itself is impressive, the Strix model blasted past 2100. As many 20 series cards from NVIDIA slam into a power ceiling well before the silicon taps out, the higher clocks here are certainly a result of the extra power that you can feed the Strix through the additional PCIe power connector. So if you're looking to overclock and want the best performance that you can possibly extract, the Strix has to be the 2060 that you choose. It was also the coolest at load without adding any significant noise to the equation, although it did also draw the most power at about 180 watts. Each 2060 here has its selling points and shortfalls as well. The Zotac card is small. It can fit in any build and is the least expensive, but it's generally the slowest. The MSI card isn't much bigger and offers better performance, but actually right now it's kind of hard to get one for less than $380, which is the cost of the better performing Gigabyte card. The gaming OC runs cool and quiet with good performance numbers at stock, but it's fairly long and doesn't quite overclock as well as some of the other cards. The Strix is by far the best performer, but it sucks up power and is, to be honest, pretty honkin' huge. Overall though, I think as we go down the new NVIDIA 20 series stack, I've been more and more impressed. The 2080 Ti is a flat out beast, but it's way out of the reach for most consumers price-wise. The 2080 is a decent performer, but didn't outshine the 1080 Ti by much, and at launch was $100 more expensive than the previous generation card. The 2070, on the other hand, was a serious piece of hardware that could be had for $500, and when overclocked was approaching 1080 Ti levels while consuming less power. And now we have the RTX 2060s, which, if we're being honest, actually are pretty great products. You can get them for $350 without an issue. They perform like a 1070 Ti or 1080. They still have all the ray tracing features, and they are actual 1440p graphics cards at a reasonable price. The fact that there are a bunch of different ones out there also gives you greater choice if your wallet has a little flexibility. And once DLSS matures, I think that we'll really start to see the value that these guys can provide. Traditionally, these 60 series SKUs have been NVIDIA's most popular, from the 760 to the 960 to the 1060. Although the 2060 is more expensive than those others, it also offers a big bump in performance and future-facing features. Good job, NVIDIA. So let me know down below in the comments which 2060 appeals to you the most. And don't forget to get subscribed to the channel if you're not already, and consider supporting us directly through Patreon or the merchandise store, where you can get long sleeve t-shirts like this one. As always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.